Hello and welcome to day 141. We have 1 Kings chapter 7, 2 Chronicles 4, Psalm 98, and Romans chapter 2. So Kings and Chronicles are going through some of the details of Solomon's palace and temple construction. Now, as you go through here, there's a lot of really amazing materials that are put into the temple and the palace. There's a lot of artistry. They go through one of the artisans in bronze that is brought in from Tyre to work on this. It sounds like it's really beautiful construction and truly glorious buildings. Now, for our reflection today, as we read through this, we have to keep in mind that Israel as a country was pretty new, and that they had had centuries of worship of God without a temple. Of course, during their time in Egypt, they were helping most likely build the temples of Egypt to the Egyptian gods, and they saw some really glorious temples there. Many of them, through trade and moving around, had seen the temples that other areas had built to their gods. And so this was a moment of pride for Israel to be building their own temple to their own God, to be able to worship their own God in a permanent, beautiful building. One of the things for us to think about in our lives today is what is the role of the buildings and the objects that we use in our religious practices. Have we thought lately about the candles or the banners or the stones or the wood in our buildings or in our worship spaces? Do we think about what we're using, the pulpits, the altars, the offering plates, the communion ware that we use? Do we show honor to God with the materials we use? Do we share with God in the creative endeavors of showing beauty through our worship elements? Now, some Christians over time have really gone towards an area of strict simplicity with no stained glass windows, no candles, no music even, very plain, simple buildings. Other ones have gone in the other direction with glorious cathedrals that show sacrifice to God of their own earthly goods to show God's glory and to honor God. And so, as we think about our practices and we read this section, we should think about how we use or make buildings and objects for our worship of God today, and how do these things connect us or separate us from God. Psalm 98 is a beautiful psalm that speaks to the glory of God. It gives thanks for God's creation and beauty in the world. It is a praise psalm. It's a wonderful celebration of God and God's rule over all creation. So, one of the things for us to think about as we go through this psalm is how can we be good servants to our ruling God today? If we are worshiping God, then how do we, as the believers in God, engage in God's rule and God's plans for the world? How do we work with God? How do we show our praise to God and our joy in God's creation through our daily choices in life? Romans reminds us that everyone has sinned. And, there's no one particular group that has cornered the market on making mistakes in life and separating ourselves from God. Everyone has sinned, which means everyone can accept the grace and forgiveness that God offers us. God will be holding us accountable for the choices that we make, and we are not to be judging others. That is God's job. It is not our job. This is something that we hear from Jesus. We've heard this in a number of places. We do not judge. We are to embrace God's way in our life. And then he goes on to a section where kind of pointing out that even if you perfectly adhere to religious rules, you might not be in a great relationship with God. Perfect following of religious rules is not salvation. Keeping to God's way and being in relationship with Jesus is what matters. Religious rules can be used to exclude people, and Paul questions, who are we really on the inside? On the outside, we might see people who are perfectly following some religious rules, but who are they on the inside? Who are they when no one's looking? Who are they when it's the quiet moments and they're connecting to God? So Paul is really calling for us to turn our life towards God and not just be part of a club or an in-group because we are considered insiders that are doing the right things according to a list of rules. So Paul's really laying the groundwork here to remind us that we need Jesus in our lives. There's a reason God sent Jesus, because we screw up on a regular basis and we separate ourselves from God on a regular basis. And Paul is also laying the groundwork that we need to be careful about our religious lives, that it's very easy for us to get caught up in setting up earthly rules that may not be fully in alignment with God's bigger plan, and that sometimes the application of the religious rules do more harm and separate people from God's grace and mercy, and that we need to make sure that we are following the spirit of God's purpose in the world and not just a written list of rules. So today, celebrate God and show the joy you have in God's creation, and see the ways and moments that you can connect with God throughout your day. We'll see you soon.